Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr, and we are in the mobile studio of Tom's car, having just spoken with Ryan Day, and then running over to the shot to speak with Chris Holtmann. And first, Tom, how are you doing?
I am truly outstanding.
All right.
Hey. How are you?
Thank you. I was going to tell everybody anyway, because that's how I have to do this, because nobody ever asks about me. But it's a long story. I'm not doing great. We can get into that. Let's just talk about basketball and football. You guys can read my personal blog for my daily tragedies. It's at sadtony.blogspot.com.
Is that because you lost the password to Hobo Burger?
That's still a sensitive topic, Tom.
We're all up in our feelings today.
Yeah. So anyway, let's talk about, first let's just go with basketball. Kaleb Wesson, we talked to Chris Holtmann today, and he said that Kaleb Wesson has put his name into the NBA draft, will probably maybe hire an agent, but will do all of this while not surrendering his eligibility in case he does not like his options and wants to return. And as we were just talking about, the new rule has been implemented that you can hire an agent, but you have to fire him in a timely manner, is basically what Chris Holtmann said. And Tom, you were in there. It didn't seem to me like Chris Holtmann expects Kaleb to leave, because when he was talking about recruiting, he was talking about how we need to find a backup five. And if Kaleb Wesson leaves, you're going to need to find probably a starting center instead of a backup. But I think it looks like he will return. And I don't know if it's just the day and age where if you are the best player on your team, you just throw your name in, or if maybe he is looking to leave, and whether that's the NBA, whether that's Europe, whether that's China. I don't know, were you surprised?
I didn't think it was surprising. I think that it's pretty clear he has pro aspirations. And that doesn't have to mean this year. Putting your name into the draft, actually, I think makes a lot of sense, and probably is going to be, under this new rule, a more and more frequent thing for people to do it. Because you really have nothing to lose. Make sure you follow the guidelines. You can hire an agent. Don't have the agent buy you a whole bunch of jewelry that would violate your NCAA eligibility. Don't have the agent buy you a suit, because you're probably not going to get the Charles Woodson exception there. So, Gerd just gasped a little bit, which is
21
really,
years, Tom. Let it go.
Which is really my goal, is to make Gerd gasp at least once audibly per podcast. But go through the process. This is like when football players put their names into the NFL Draft Advisory Board. Get some feedback. Right. Find out what they think you need to work on. I don't think I'm going to be going way out on a limb here and say I don't think Kaleb Wesson is going to get a NBA draft lottery grade back from the NBA Draft Advisory Board. But go through this process, figure out, hey, they think I need to work on these three things. Then I can spend another year going through those three things, and then think about it again next year. And if you go to Europe, or you go to China, or you put your name into the NBA draft a year from now, that's good information for the future.
Yeah, and I don't know that the feedback, because some of that feedback is going to be impossible to improve on, essentially, in which it would be like improve your athleticism, improve your explosion. You can do a little bit of that, but he's always going to be limited athletically, and that's why I don't necessarily know that he has an NBA future. But you could still make a pretty good living for 10 years overseas, and then you come back to the States and you're, 31, 32, and you've got some money in the bank, and you can begin the process of adulthood. It's not a bad way to go, but yeah, I expect him to come back. I wonder if next year would be his last year, because then you'll have more information, and as Holtmann said, you can really never have enough information, and so this is more, and it gives the players just options, or allows them to weigh their options in a more knowledgeable manner. And I wonder what happens then after next season, if he decides that, I've been here long enough, and who hasn't gotten senioritis as a junior, Tom?
I know I was there. And that'll happen. That's okay. I mean, people, I'm sure when you said he may be here one more year, might have thought, oh, God, what, like he's going to be a lottery pick this time next year. You could make some decent money in Europe. You're not making LeBron James money in Europe, but you're probably making more than the average college grad is by some significant amount, and go play basketball. And if
3 months,
right, and if, like you said, if there is the need to work on is stuff that he really can't significantly improve, then your draft stock is not going to materially improve in this course of a year. So go get that money. So this may be the first step in that process, and the second step comes a year from now.
Yep. I mean, it's not like a cornerback where, if you improve your hips here, you do this, you do that, make more plays on the ball. He is what he is, and what he is as a junior, I don't know that he'll be much better as a senior. He looks like he should be a 4-year college guy, but if you want to go play pro ball and there's not going to be much of a jump between your junior and senior year, then what are you staying for, I guess, is a way a lot of players would look at it, not necessarily like how I would look at it. But again, it's maybe seasons are like 6 months over there. Maybe, I don't know. They play like once a week even. So it's not as rigorous as here. And there's a bunch of different leagues and you can do it. And there's also, you got the G League over here, which, if that's what you want to do. But so that's Kaleb Wesson. We can now transition to football, if that's okay with the listeners. The spring game is this weekend. Ryan Day laid out some of the rules or what you should expect. It's 10-minute quarters. Second half will have a running clock. There will be no tackling. It will be thud only. I don't know if the defensive players, do they have to yell thud as they're coming into contact with somebody?
And they will have to have 3 Mississippis before they can rush the passer.
Correct, and we got to hear those Mississippis, and don't be doing it quickly. So yeah, and he said, speaking of 3 Mississippis in a pass rush, don't expect Chase Young to play much. And like the first series would be 1s versus 1s, and then it would be go to like 2s versus 2s, and then you'll just mix and match whatever you can, and don't expect to see a bunch of stars or key players on Saturday for very long.
No, there are some guys that I'm kind of wondering about. Like last year, J.K. Dobbins had 1 carry in the spring game. Mike Weber had 1 carry in the spring game. This year, Dobbins has said he wants to be treated like a freshman. So does that mean he's going to get 10 carries in the spring game? Maybe. But there are a lot of guys who are sitting out. There are guys who are sitting out because of injury who we've talked about before. Thayer Munford, Jordan Fuller, Tuff Borland, Day said is going to be sitting out. Marcus Williamson is going to be sitting out. We didn't ask about Robert Landers, but I would assume that Robert Landers is probably sitting out. Demario McCall has not played or practiced this spring, so Demario McCall is probably sitting out. So there are going to be a whole bunch of guys you're not going to see, but you will see the younger guys. The younger guys are what you're going there to see, because you know what. I mean, pick an older player. You know what Damon Arnett looks like. You know what Pete Werner looks like. You're there to go see the younger players for the first time.
Are you saying Buckeye fans are not going there to watch Tuff Borland?
Well, they're not going to because he's not playing, obviously. So,
how many Buckeye fans do you think will show up and be like, "What the heck? Where's Tuff? I want my $5 back."
Yeah, but this is the overarching theme for Saturday is, please go enjoy a nice sunny day in Ohio Stadium. Perhaps enjoy some tailgating. Do not draw too many conclusions from the game itself, because you're not going to see a true representation of what you're going to see this fall. Plus, a whole bunch of stuff is going to change between now and then anyway. I have a piece scheduled to go up on Thursday morning about that. Like, it's just, look at how much has changed in the last year, since last year's spring game, when literally everybody who threw a pass is gone. Everyone who rushed for more than 10 yards is gone. It's just like you have a ton of turnover right now, except for Master Teague. Master Teague was the only one who did come back. But
J.K. Dobbins?
He had 1 carry for 0 yards last year. In the spring game, yes. Yes, in the spring game last year. So there's a lot that people are going to want to draw conclusions from, so-and-so looked amazing in the spring game. And you will feel tempted to do that. Don't do that. Go enjoy a nice sunny Saturday in Ohio Stadium, and don't sweat the final score. Don't sweat too many of the details, because if the offensive line looks terrible, well, they're missing a bunch of starters, and they're still mixing and matching, and
it's two-hand touch on the quarterback.
They
should not look great. If the offensive line looks great, be worried about the defensive line. If the defensive line looks great, they should, against an offensive line which has what they say maybe like 11 players right now that they have, maybe 10 that they can play, and they're split between two teams.
Right. Yeah, they have 5 offensive linemen on each team, and they are going to be. He said they're going to be guys who are going to be switching jerseys and going back and forth, and so which is another reason why it's going to be a running clock in the second half, because they will have seen what they need to see at that point, and in the second half it's going to be a whole bunch of walk-ons and guys who even were looking at the roster and go, who is that again?
Well, and if you look at the box score last year, I believe both Joe Burrow and actually all 3 quarterbacks played on both teams.
Correct.
Joe Burrow had better numbers than Dwayne Haskins, if I recall. Mm-hmm. And so, it was clear at that time that Joe Burrow should have been the starting quarterback. Mm-hmm. And yet, for whatever reason, they settled with Dwayne Haskins. And
was Dwayne Haskins good enough to play in the SEC? I don't think so.
No, or else he would have been there. It was either Maryland or Ohio State for Dwayne Haskins. So,
one thing I had forgotten about, when I went back and looked, I reread your 10 things we learned from the spring game piece. And number one, and if you want to find this, it's going to be linked in the thing that I wrote on Thursday morning about how much has changed in a year. So you can find it there if nowhere else. But your number 1 was Joe Burrow should be the starting quarterback. Number 2 was Dwayne Haskins should be the starting quarterback.
I was right,
and you were right. You know what? I think you said Tate Martell flashed, which I think you were wrong, because Tate Martell should have been the starting quarterback, as is canon on this podcast. Yeah,
saying Tate Martell flashed is like saying the sun flashed, or whatever. It's like, that's what he does. So Ryan Day today was asked, what players have kind of stood out to him this spring that haven't really had a role in the past, and he mentioned 2 players right away. And this first player, and I promise you guys, we're not just hyping somebody up, because that's what, there's always one guy every year that has to get the hype. But Ryan Day, right away, said Garrett Wilson, freshman wide receiver. We talk about him every week. We've probably talked about him every single week since before he committed. And it's not because there's nothing else to talk about. Granted, we are in a car with nothing written down, trying to figure out how to make this last for 45 minutes. But he is someone worth talking about. And I hope, Tom, I hope he plays most of the game and he does something electrifying, or that we've seen him do before, just so that we don't look like we're just idiots or hyping somebody. If he catches 3 passes for a yard and gets tackled and fumbles twice, it's going to be a bad scene. I don't expect that from him. Tom, we're not hyping him up. It's the coaches and the players and what we're seeing. I mean, it's not undue.
We certainly don't think it's undue.
Right.
And Ryan Day doesn't think it's undue. Now, is that because Ryan Day heard us talking about Garrett Wilson on the podcast? I don't know. Maybe he did specifically say based on what he's seen in practice.
Like, those guys are right.
What those guys talked about on the podcast last week. He is someone who is not going to catch 1,700 yards worth of receptions this year. Like, that's not. You have to come into this with some reasonable expectations. The Justin Ross from Clemson is like the 99th percentile outcome, where he had 1,000 yards, and that took 15 games. That is about the 99th percentile outcome for what Garrett Wilson's freshman season could look like. If Garrett Wilson puts up 400 yards receiving this season, that would be pretty remarkable. That would be a pretty 400, 500 yards. That would be a remarkable freshman year. And that's probably about a 70th percentile outcome, let's say. That there's still a whole bunch of ways that it doesn't necessarily translate to the field, And it might not translate to the field on Saturday. We don't know for sure because you don't know exactly how the quarterbacks are going to look. You don't know how much time the quarterbacks are going to have behind those offensive lines. There's all sorts of stuff you have to think about that could impact it. But we promise we're not just making it up. We are telling you what we've seen, and the coaches are seeing the same thing. So one of the other things that Day talked about today was how Wilson is blocking.
Yeah.
And said, he's doing okay. He's willing to put his face in there. He's willing to do it, but he needs to get stronger. That's one of the things that, yes, he's an explosive playmaker, but he has to be well-rounded and do the little things like blocking in order to stay on the field consistently. And he's working on it. He's getting there. He's not there yet. He has all of preseason camp, and then even if it's the first, takes the first couple weeks of the season before he gets on the field regularly, he'll get there eventually.
In the summer to get stronger to help with that blocking.
Exactly. Yeah, he's got another summer in the weight room. All of that's going to help. The fact that he was in for the spring gives him a nice little leg up over some of the other guys, over the guys who would be coming in the summer. So, patience. You'll maybe see it on Saturday, but patience, you will see it eventually, we promise.
And I don't want to stop talking about Garrett Wilson just yet, but Tom, if I give you Zach Harrison or Garrett Wilson, which of those two do you think is an All-American? You can pick one of those. Who do you take?
I have to pick only one?
Yep.
Is it who's there first, or who
is the most likely?
The most likely.
Or do you think they're equally likely? But who would say? Okay, let's go. Who gets there first if they both get there?
I think Zach Harrison, because he is probably he could get there next year. Like, we've seen Ohio State defensive ends get there early enough in their career that I think there's a decent chance he gets there. But that was not me thinking like, oh, is one of them going to get there? That was like, oh yeah, that is a distinct possibility for both of them, and which one would get there first.
Tom, if neither gets there, who is the most likely to not get there?
Who will we have been falsely overhyping?
And we'll get to Zach Harrison. Yeah, but getting back to the receivers and Garrett Wilson, and I think we've talked about this on the show, that Austin Mack has moved to Z, and I think some of that is done because the second Z was Garrett Wilson without that move. It's Chris Olave, and then it was Garrett Wilson. And by moving Mack over, now you don't have to rely on Garrett Wilson as much. So you've got Mack and Olave as the first two at Z, and then at X you've got Benjamin Victor and Jalen Harris. Austin Mack is this guy who could go back and forth, and I'm wondering if maybe he starts the season at Z, but because Garrett Wilson progresses as they want, the Mack moves back over to X. Olave elevates himself as well as we expect, and right now it's about getting the best three in Mack, Victor, and Hill. I wonder if Olave can move into the best three, and if Wilson elevates himself to, you're going to get to this point where who is better, Jalen Harris or Garrett Wilson, and whoever is better then either stays at 2 for Harris or moves to 2 for Wilson, and then Mack goes to the other side. And you've got, like, right now Mack is at Z, but I could see, and maybe I think it's likely that Mack is back at X by like November. If I'll ask you, where do you see Mack in November?
There's a pretty good chance that he's back at X. That has certainly been the context that we've discussed this in. Yeah. That they moved him to Z because you have a chance to get Jalen Harris some more reps. This is kind of insurance if Garrett Wilson isn't ready for game 1. It allows you to bring him along a little more gradually. You're not rushing. There's no reason to rush him. They have plenty of wide receiver talent on this team, and Austin Mack is perfectly capable of doing all the things you would need to do at the Z position. So there's no reason to rush Wilson in. But yeah, that would not be remotely surprising if Mack was back at X and Wilson was in that top 6 rotation by the end of the year.
And then at Chris Olave they'll decide in the next couple of days whether he will play, because he had a groin or a hamstring,
just a little hamstring tweak during the practice we watched.
It feels like if they're deciding whether or not somebody's going to play, they'll probably decide on not playing. But I don't know. It would be good to see. It was something else you guys might see with the Z's this year, and the under center stuff is more sweeps with the Z's, which we never really saw last year. It was mostly just with the X's or the H's. And so this season you'll see Olave running the ball a bit and Garrett Wilson running the ball a bit, which I think is, I don't know that we'll see Austin Mack doing that, because as much as they want to say he can do everything, I mean, I don't see him as being one of these quick, fast guys. And so that's something else you'll be able to watch, as you should rejoice in Ohio State quarterbacks taking snaps from under center. Although the fun part will be when they don't do it in 3rd and 4th and 1.
I don't think we could possibly have more fun with that than we did last year with Urban Meyer taking it under advisement during press conferences. One of the best answers of the season.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and I think the question was, why don't you do it? And Urban's like, well, you don't. Spread teams just don't practice it. And then it was like, well, have you thought about practicing it? Something to that effect. And yes, we'll take that under advisement. Thank you, media. I hate you all.
Ron Howard narrator voice. He did not take it under advisement.
And then he hated us so much he retired. Anything else on offense that we should look for? I don't expect JK to play much. Ryan Day said Marcus Crowley has performed well. Master Teague is banged up a little, so who knows how much he will play. The running backs this spring might just be in the spring game might just be Crowley and the walk-ons.
Yeah, and when we say the walk-ons, Xavier Johnson is kind of halfway between the regular walk-ons and the scholarship players. He's the one we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Who had a scholarship offer from Iowa State, North Dakota State. He's someone who is just worth keeping an eye on. He has the potential to be that next C.J. Saunders guy, or Kevin Woidke, who goes from walk-on to scholarship player at some point. So he's 49. We don't know which team he'll be on yet. Day said that they're not doing a draft like they did in previous years. They're going to just kind of assign guys to try and kind of get. He said strength on strength or good on good or something like that, where it's you got the first team defense will be mostly going against the first team offense, and the second team defense will be going against the second team offense, more or less. They'll be moving guys around. There are all sorts of guys who, if Tough Borland is not playing, then Taraja Mitchell will be either a first or second team middle linebacker. Is he a first or second team middle linebacker? If the season started today, maybe not. But stuff like that is just worth. Don't read too much into where people are, but that's kind of the general guideline for what to expect. Yeah,
I saw a post on our board today saying that Zach Harrison was running with the ones at practice today, and I had to reply. It's like that's not new, and it doesn't mean he's with the ones.
Yes, everyone has been with the ones at some point this year.
And literally, if you've been on defense and you haven't been with the ones, then you're probably third string at best.
At best, we have seen Zach Harrison with the fourth string, and we have seen Zach Harrison with the first string. Yes. And based on what we saw, there was a practice that we saw where he had 2 or 3 sacks in a relatively short period of time. That was last week.
That was Friday.
Last Friday. Yeah,
scrimmaging.
So we have a reason to suspect that Zach Harrison is closer to first team than fourth team, but I don't want to spoil anything, but Zach Harrison is probably not going to be one of the 2 starting defensive ends when they take the field against Florida Atlantic in September.
Well, in your opinion. Because there was that Friday scrimmage. We can go ahead and get into that a bit. We'll cover it all. We'll get it all covered. He had 3 sacks in the final portion of that. One of those was against Nicholas Petit-Frere, who Ryan Day has, as close to Ryan Day can come to raving. Mm-hmm. He raves about Nicholas Petit-Frere this spring. I think the other 2 sacks were maybe against walk-ons. And all of these sacks are touch sacks. So this is as the guy is coming around the edge and a quarterback is stepping into the pocket. If the defensive end can touch the quarterback, they blow it dead. So they're not real sacks, but the fact that he is already doing this, and He was with the first unit with the rushmen while they were scrimmaging as well. Of course, Tyler Friday wasn't practicing, so I'm assuming that would normally be Tyler Friday. But everything that could have been expected of Zach Harrison this spring, I think he's exceeded it, because I viewed him as this not super raw, but just more athlete than football player, like an incredible athlete. But he is taking to this defensive end thing, this football thing, and it's not like he's never played football. I didn't watch him a lot in hai school, so when I say he's raw or whatever, that's just from what other people have said about him. But he certainly looks the part and has exceeded what I thought he would be this spring.
If you have the raw materials, it does not generally take Larry Johnson all that long to make something pretty impressive out of it. So it's not shocking that he's flashing already, and there's a long way to go between flashing at practice and doing it on a Saturday afternoon in the fall. There's still lots of work to do, and you'll talk to guys who are 3 years into their career, and they'll say, I thought I knew what I was doing as a freshman, and then by the time I actually knew what I was doing, I realized I didn't know what I was doing as a freshman. So there's some learning curve there. And you go back to Nick Bosa, go back to Joey Bosa as a true freshman. You saw them, but they were not what they were as a finished product.
And they both came in in the summer.
Right. Chase Young, same thing. Chase Young, when he came in, he was very physically impressive. We saw a bunch of him as... Did he come in early? No, he was in the summer. Yeah. He came in the summer in 2017, and I remember looking at him and going like, whoa, that kid does not look like a freshman. But he didn't have a monster freshman year. He took a big step forward as a sophomore. So, as with Garrett Wilson, keep it in perspective. When we say this person is potentially going to be a star or potentially be an All-American, we are not talking about this year. That is 2020, 2021. He will, I don't expect Zach Harrison to have a tree in Buckeye Grove this year, but give it a year or two, and that's certainly a possibility.
Who has more sacks this year, Garrett Wilson or Zach Harrison?
That one.
You're going with Zach Harrison again, huh?
Yeah, I think this is now an anti-Garrett Wilson podcast.
We're just trying to even it out.
If we have established one thing, our editorial position, Garrett Wilson, not very good on defense.
Cannot rush the passer. I think Chase Young had around 3.5, 4 sacks as a freshman.
That sounds right.
And I don't think that my season expectations for Zach Harrison, I think, would fall in line with what Chase Young did as a freshman, and that's why I don't think you should ever expect something. Don't expect a Bosa out of non-Bosas, as I've said before. So don't expect Zach Harrison to fight himself into the starting lineup or into the 4-man rotation at defensive end and come away with freshman All-American status, and it's just not fair to him. But I mean, he's already ahead of those two based on the fact that he's been here longer and he has gotten that tutelage. And Joey Bosa did not have Larry Johnson as a freshman. He had Mike Vrabel, so he got yelled at a lot. But he came through it. And another guy who impressed me at defensive end in that scrimmage was Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who looked similar to Zach Harrison in terms of length and, still a little skinny, but looking more like a defensive end every day. And that was something that Tim May was standing next to him. He's like, every time you see Zach Harrison, he gets bigger, and he's like a puppy. You go away for a few days, and you come back, and he's bigger. But Javonte Jean-Baptiste had at least one sack during the scrimmage. Another time he chased down Master Teague along the line of scrimmage and brought him down from behind. Another time he did the same thing to Jalen Gill on a sweep. And it was just impressive to see the way he swallowed up the ball carrier from behind, like you see big-name defensive ends do. And we're talking about Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Zach Harrison, who might be 5th and 6th in line right now. at defensive end.
Or 6th and 7th if you want to throw Noah Potter in there. Noah Potter's looked good at times this spring.
So they're very deep there, and that's why when somebody says, Zach Harrison's working with the ones, it's a long line of players working with the ones. But also, here, let me ask you, Tom, if I set the over-under at 1.5 sacks for the spring game for Zach Harrison, where are you going?
Probably, oh boy, I guess if they're not going to play Tyler Friday, he may or may not play. If they're not going to play Chase Young much, he's going to get a lot of time. He's going to be working against something of a patchwork offensive line potentially. If he's with the twos especially, going against the second-team offensive line, I think I'm going to go over that.
What if I go 1.7? Still over? You are such a Zach Harrison fanboy, it's ridiculous.
It's just a matter of whether he was going to get to share a sack with 4 other players on the same play, which I don't know. I don't know exactly how they're going to score it. And this is such a high-stakes thing. I don't just want to. Right. I don't just want to throw out an answer on this. I really want to ruminate on it.
All right, we'll finish up. We'll get back to that one. Ryan Day also said he was looking forward to seeing what the interior defensive line looks like on Saturday because they've done very well. And like I said, I think on the last show, Larry Johnson said this is his best group in a while at nose tackle, and he's not even including Robert Landers in there, who hasn't been able to practice. And so when we talk about players we're looking forward to seeing, obviously Garrett Wilson, obviously Zach Harrison, but another one for me is Tommy Togiai. I think is any chance we get to watch that guy, it's fun because he's just a brute. Mm-hmm. And, he'll be going up against scholarship guys and walk-on guys. And not only is he a brute, but as Larry Johnson's told me in the past, he could play 3 technique, he could play nose tackle, so he can do a lot of different things. And he provides some pass rushing at nose tackle as well, which the Buckeyes don't always have. But he's another guy I'm looking forward to seeing. Tom, any names right now that you are looking forward to seeing that we don't normally get to see? Defensively?
On the defensive side of the ball, I'm interested in seeing Josh Proctor.
Yeah.
He's someone that Ryan Day actually mentioned as there were 3 names when someone asked him who were the 3 guys who we haven't seen before who've kind of popped to you this spring. He mentioned Garrett Wilson, he mentioned Shaun Wade, and he mentioned Josh Proctor. Wade, we saw a decent amount last year. I'm intrigued by Wade, but we've seen enough of him that I'm really most interested in Proctor on that defensive side of the ball. He is someone who, I don't know which safety position they're really looking at him at right now. Are they thinking he's going to play that free spot in center field? Or
because on Friday he was behind Isaiah Pryor at that free spot, the deep safety spot.
Yeah, that will be intriguing because he's someone who he's fast, he's athletic, he's got good awareness on the field. He is a natural safety. He's not someone who they've moved to safety or has to learn the position. He's someone who could be a starter this year, just depending on, there's so many moving pieces there with the Bullet and with Jordan Fuller sitting out this spring, and we don't know for sure where everyone's really going to fit yet. And I'm not convinced that they know where everyone's going to fit yet. But Proctor is someone who could be in the mix to be a starter this year. And if he does get on the field, he's the kind of guy who, could be at some point, maybe, even if it's not this year, even if it's next year, could be one of those guys who's, the next great Ohio State safety. Like that is within the realm of possibility for him.
As they split these teams up, I'm assuming it'll be Isaiah Pryor on one team and Proctor on the other, which would give people a good opportunity to see, to compare them against each other, because I haven't really seen much of Josh Proctor this spring. I've heard his name quite a bit as I'm watching other drills, and we've got usually 2 guys on the mics saying, hey, good job, this guy. And so I hear Proctor more than I've gotten to see him. So I'm looking, he's a good name to keep an eye on this spring, or in this spring game, because we see clips last year as the football team puts out their tweets of action, and he was always one guy making plays. And I am interested to see the range that he has, and does he... Malik Hooker would make plays in the spring, and can Proctor make some of those plays where you're like, when we start hyping him up and people are like, oh, Bam Childress, Bam Childress. And not, as I've said before, not all of these Bam Childresses end up being Bam Childress. Sometimes they end up being Malik Hooker. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they end up being Mike Thomas. So the whole Bam Childress meme, I'm totally against.
There's a reason that meme is about a guy who was doing it 20 years ago. It's because it doesn't actually happen every year.
Right, or else you would have some new name for it. Or maybe DeMario McCall, but McCall was... People, I forget, like if you need to go back and look at the box score last year, McCall was awesome in that game. Mm-hmm. And it's so unfortunate that he can't go yet, because I do think he's going to be a big part of this team if he's ever healthy enough to be a sustained member of the offense. Getting back to Shaun Wade, and Ryan Day is even like, Shaun Wade was the second guy he mentioned and was like, well, and I know he's played and he played a lot for us last year, but he's continued to make plays this spring as he fluctuates from, we always see him at safety and nickel, but he's also drilling with the corners. And when I'm watching just the position drills, like he's with the corners at times, and he's the only safety with the corners. Mm-hmm. And it's so much to ask of him, and yet he continues to play well. And when we talk about guys who are going to be like the cornerstones of this defense this year, I mean, right at the top for me, it's like Brendan White and Shaun Wade make this defense, I think, possible.
He is someone who he might not be the best player on the defense, but he might be one of the most important players on the defense, where if you tell me what kind of season Shaun Wade has, I have a decent chance of telling you how well this Ohio State defense plays. In the same way that they needed to find Brendan White, and all of a sudden, it looked like a functional Ohio State defense last year. If they get a good season out of Shaun Wade, this could be a pretty good defense. He came in, it kind of gets forgotten now because Jeff Okudah everyone's looking at Jeff Okudah and going, oh, he's going to be a first-round pick next year. Shaun Wade came in ranked basically right where Jeff Okudah was. They were the first and second ranked corners in the country that year. Wade missed his whole freshman year with an abdominal injury. Okudah got to play, got to start as a freshman, got all that hype off that 1 year, then was a regular starter at corner last year, while Wade kind of bounced around a little bit and got asked to do some different stuff, and he's kind of bouncing around again this year. It just seems like if he finds a home, if he finds a role in this defense, even if it's at a couple different spots, he has the potential to be that game-changing player that they really need back there.
And that the scrimmage, the practice on Friday, he was at strong safety with the ones, which means he's up towards the line of scrimmage, and he's either defending a tight end or a slot receiver. And he's equipped to do both of that, both of those things, because he's a tall corner. He's 6'1", 195 or so. And so when you match him up with a tight end, he seems like a guy who will lock that position down. And then he's just as comfortable defending the slot receivers. And, he wasn't great as the nickel at times last year against these slot receivers, but it's tough to defend those guys. It's tough to find. That's why in the NFL it's growing more and more important to find that slot corner who can handle those guys. So when you see him giving up catches last year, it's like, well, that's what most nickelbacks end up doing. And it's tough to defend offenses nowadays. But his versatility in defending the types of receivers that Ohio State will face makes the defense versatile in that they're not as susceptible to huddles, or they don't. He's able, whatever an offense is going to show them at any particular time, he gives them the ability to man up the tight end. And there were times where he would show, like, he's pressed up against the tight end if the tight end is flexed out a little bit, but then he's immediately coming off of that and defending, like, say, a quick hitch to a receiver, and showing man but dropping back into a zone. And they're just doing all of these different things. And that's why I think we mentioned last week or the week before where Jeff Okudah said that Shaun Wade was told that he could have 15 interceptions in this defense. And I don't believe that number, but if you were to tell me like 6, 7, 8, that would not out of the realm of possibility. Knowing and seeing the nose that he had for the football last year with 3 interceptions in nickelback duty.
Yeah, he's someone who I can't really think of a situation that they could put him in that it would be like, oh no, he definitely can't do that. Yeah. He's versatile. I mean, people have discussed him as like a Swiss Army knife, and he can do a little bit of everything, and it's just a matter of him being able to learn all of those different spots, because that is asking a lot of him. And if he can do it, and they certainly seem to think that he can do it, and they've spent a lot more time around him than I have, so if they think he can do it and they think they're putting him in a position to succeed, if he really can do that, he is the kind of person that could be he may not be a national award winner, but he could be a the team defensive most valuable player kind of thing this year.
And opposing coaches will know what a pain in the butt it was to deal with him. And I think where he ends up this season is going to be similar to the Austin Mack situation, where there's moving parts that don't really have anything to do with him. Like Josh Proctor right now is the deep safety. I kind of see Jordan Fuller there as well if Shaun Wade is the strong safety. I see him being a better maybe man defender than perhaps Jordan Fuller, so Jordan Fuller stays back. But if Josh Proctor shows that he needs to be on the field, do they move Jordan Fuller to strong and then Wade is just a nickel? I mean, there's so many the moving parts right now in not having Jordan Fuller. I think while it benefits the young guys, I wonder if it kind of hampers the coaches, and they would like to maybe be further along. And that's something we'll talk to Hafley and Barnes after the spring game. I think we'll probably get them Monday or Tuesday, all of the coaches, and just see like how little do they know about where guys are going to be, because Jordan Fuller is a very big piece, and where does that piece fit?
Right. There's so many things that are subject to change on this team right now that I feel like we could try and put together a depth chart, and maybe that's something we'll do after the spring game, and kind of post-spring depth chart. And it's a little bit like putting together an NFL mock draft where you could be real close, but if one team trades up and that changes, that throws a different name in the mix, and everyone else slides down, and then the 10 teams after that don't need a quarterback, and someone slides down 10 spots, then you look like an idiot. And it's like, well, no, I was really off by one thing because of one thing I didn't know. So
yeah, exactly, and then everything builds off of that one miss.
So please read our post-spring depth chart when we put that out, because it is definitely going to be the definitive document of the spring.
Right, and it will be fire. We'll start wrapping up here, Tom. Let's see. Give me a pick to click for the spring game. Who do you think walks away as the offense and defense MVPs?
I'm glad you asked me first, so I can say Garrett Wilson.
And defense?
Defense. I guess let's go with. I'll go with Zach Harrison. Sure, why not? I mean, those are. Here's the thing. These are the guys who people are going to be looking for. Right. So if they do it, then sure.
Yeah. And they should play a lot.
Can I give you a free space on this bingo card?
All right.
There is a transfer quarterback whose name we have not mentioned yet on this show, who would also be a very good choice if Garrett Wilson was already taken.
Well, funny you should mention. Justin Fields, I believe his name is.
I was talking about Chris Chuganoff.
Was
that?
Chug is a sneaky bet for offensive MVP.
He could get some reps.
I wonder how long Fields will play. If you're going to have a running clock, why not play him into the third quarter? But on Friday, at the end of Friday's practice, it was Fields who was just standing back and watching for like the last 10 or 15 minutes. So maybe he doesn't play in the fourth quarter. But then if he's not playing and Baldwin is, you're telling everybody that here's my starting quarterback as he stands next to me watching.
Yes.
So.
And I would be surprised if you saw either of those guys out there with anything other than the first team line or the second team, like a complete second team line, because they don't want to, even if it's thud, they still don't want any of those guys getting hit or bumped or rolled up on or anything else. I think they're going to be probably pretty careful with that. I would expect to see a good amount of Chris Chuganoff and Danny Vanatsky in the second half.
Poor sacrificial Danny Vanatsky. And then, they'll make announcement over the loudspeaker. Vanatsky is now live. And then, they'll just unleash holy hell. Defensively, it's been interesting that how often Ryan Day has said the linebackers are making more plays and making more plays in the passing game. So, but I don't want to go with the linebacker because they don't really run the ball much. So I'll go Josh Proctor. How's that?
That's another name that I.
So Fields and Proctor. Yeah, okay, I'll take that. Although Justin Fields will have some runs, but they'll blow him dead pretty quickly.
It'll be like Tate Martell last year, where there were a bunch of runs with Tate Martell where he was like breaking out, and it was like, okay, now he could go 20 yards right now, but there was a guy who was 2 yards away and they blew it dead.
Yeah. If you could have a draft, like if you drafted MVP possibilities, Garrett Wilson's going probably one or two, I think, because he'll play most of the game and Justin Fields probably won't. So anything else, Tom, before we close it up here?
I think we're good to go. If you have not bought tickets already, you should buy tickets now. I spoke to an Ohio State spokesperson after interviews today. As of Wednesday morning, 63,000 tickets were already gone. They only have 76,000 for the game, so do not plan on being able to walk up and buy tickets on Saturday morning, because 13,000 tickets went between Friday and Wednesday, and there's only about 13,000 tickets left, so you should buy them now if you want to come to the spring game.
Although I will say, resale only has those $5 tickets marked up to $49.
That's a pretty good deal. And by the way, kids under six are free. Ohio State students are free with a student ID, so you do not have to buy tickets if you are in one of those groups, but if you are bringing your kids, you will need a ticket. Although
if you are a child and also a student, you do have to buy a ticket.
Doogie Howser.
Yeah.
The Doogie Howser rule. And if you have not come to a spring game and you have little kids, this is a fantastic time to come take your kids, see an Ohio State game, especially if they're young, especially if they are in that 6 and under. They are not going to care that it is not the starting players playing a whole game. They are not going to know what's going on. They're going to go listen to the band. And I remember bringing my daughter when she was, 3 or 4, and we got there kind of early, and I said, where do you want to sit? Pick any seat in the stadium. And she wanted to sit by the band, because that's what they want. Go feed them popcorn, teach them the fight song, and enjoy a nice day of sunshine in Ohio Stadium.
And now it's, where do you want to sit? I want to sit by the rock music speakers.
I want to sit by Giovanni.
I'm going to sit by Buckeye Guy.
No one wants to do that.
All right, if you want to sit by Buckeye Guy, you're going to have to wear a helmet, because you might get elbowed in the face as the camera comes around. All right, that'll do it. Thank you for listening. We will be back with a post-game, spring game, Facebook Live.
Are we going to do a pregame? Are we going to do a pregame Facebook Live?
We'll do a pregame as well.
Yeah.
So look for that on Facebook/theozone.net, all one word. Facebook.com/theozone.net.
All spelled out. THEOZONE.
Of course it's all spelled out.
Well, you could. Dot is actually something people.
But I said all one word. So.
Okay.
But yes, these words will have to be spelled out. Thank you. All right, that'll do it. Everybody, we will talk to you later.